what is the thing you love the most? What is the thing you love the most? And a guy might be listening to this right now, and the dad, he may say, oh, I love my children the most. Well, man, I would encourage you to reconsider. If you're married, probably your wife should be above your children. That's a more primal relationship. That's the gospel. But even above your wife should be God the Father. You should love. Jesus said, you're going to have to hate your family. I mean, he didn't mean actually hate your family, but he meant when put to the test, you got to pick me.
Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Lawson, I reached out to a few of my ministry running buddies and friends, and I asked about top issues that they're hearing from dads that they work with. A few stood out to me, a couple in particular, and we're going to talk about that on this week's show. I'm so excited because these guys represent thousands and thousands of dads. Like, these guys are in the mix. They're rolling around in the issues and the challenges of the day with fathers. And so their feedback is like a wide angle lens on what's going on in the hearts and minds of dads. And I'm super pumped to talk about some of that on today's show. Before we get too far, I want to remind you, Dad, if you're listening, if you like this episode, share the show with somebody. It would help us spread the word, help us reach more dads. We're getting close to somewhere between around 100,000 downloads, and we have you to thank for that. Thank you for sharing the show with other people. We're super excited when you do that. And if you're a guy who does not like today's show, well, just share it with somebody anyway and ridicule us. We'll take our chances with that other guy. He's probably going to love it. No, just half kidding. I'm only half kidding. Share the show. If you love it, share it. If you hate it, share it. If you're ambivalent about it, share it. We don't care. Why? Lawson, how are you, buddy?
We'll take our chances.
Yeah.
Hey, man. Good morning. I'm doing good. This is a great topic for me. I think at the somewhere as we begin to break this down and start talking about kind of the underlying reason for maybe sometimes how we feel, how us guys feel, us dads feel. Maybe getting down into the root cause of it is going to be an interesting path today.
Yeah. I hope that we offend some people. No, I'm just kidding. It's not my intention, but I have the same issues, right? Like, the funny thing about these fatherhood things is I am the target, So like, I remember working in the advertising business, and often I would have a product I might be shepherding or leading the creative work for, and I wasn't the target. So the only thing I had to go on was research and market research and competitive analysis and things you do to try to understand a target of which you're not a member. If I'm marketing, really amazing lawn care equipment to people, I could care less, man. As long as I got a little bit of grass out there and my kids can mow it, I could care less. I'm not the target for the nicest John Deere lawnmower. But in this case, I am the target, right? This is like, we're looking across dads, and I'm one of you. Like, I'm raising kids. They're in my home. I booted them out of our homeschool office this morning so we could record this podcast. So like, I'm living the dynamics that most of these dads are living, albeit with, my own unique set of challenges and blessings, right? I reached out to guys who lead ministries, reached out to guys who write and speak and teach, reached out to guys who run organizations or in churches. And I just want to run down a quick list of a few things that I heard and see if any of these resonate, Lawson, with you personally, but also if you think any of these resonate with the guy listening today. One guy said that guys are wanting more autonomy. They feel micromanaged, both either at home and at work. One guy was saying they want more mastery. Like, they feel like they're trying to learn a skill or do something, but they're not very good at it, and they're trying more. Maybe that describes fatherhood for you, because it does for me many days.
Yeah.
Some said something about wanting more purpose. Guys feel like they're drifting, or they're just putting in the work or doing the grind, but they're really not sure kind of for what purpose. A I love how one of the guys I texted said, chasing, be more, do more, have more, get more. I loved the way that he put that. He said, chasing, be more, do more, have more, get more. And he also mentioned lack of Sabbath rest, a struggle to embrace ambition and productivity from a spirit of love and restfulness versus a spirit of drivenness, which is, I think, a very intriguing idea. One guy said addiction, lust, making work an idol, burnout from not measuring up, persuaded by distractions the world has to offer, always wanting something more and better. One guy said too busy. The schedules we're keeping at home. We don't have much time as a couple, too tired, not appreciated enough, on an island with a big load on their shoulders. And you talked to one guy, Lawson, as well, who had some thoughts on this topic. Why don't you share what that came in, and we'll get past the depressing part of this show and get on with some ideas on how to, I know even as I read that, I'm like, gee whiz, man, I felt pretty decent until we started talking. Now I feel horrible.
Yeah. I was listening and going, whew, this is a lot, man. Like, I feel it. It's hard. It's hard living in today's world where everything coming at us is about that. Be more, get more, do more. There's so little in our world today coming at us saying, hey, relax, rest, take care of yourself and your family and deprioritize some of what you're chasing. That would be rare. Although, there are apps now, like there's a Calm app that is about breathing and meditating. And I don't know if some of this stuff comes my way because, like, my daughter Olivia is a yoga instructor, and so there are things we talk about, things that we research, and so the more you do that on your phone, the more you're going to get. But there is some of that out there. But man, everywhere we turn, in movies, in songs, on the news, it's about do more, be more. You're not there. Keep striving, keep hard at it. And so that can mount up, it can become, if we listen to that voice and we listen to all that's coming at us, it's hard not to feel like I just did when you were going through that list of like, whew, yeah, it's not easy being a dad. Dylan is my nephew. He married my niece. He's an Army captain and leads a really large group. Right now, he's in a job where Army recruits going through boot camp are like he's leading the drill instructors and the other people that are training them to get through. And so, is there purpose there? Heck yeah, there's purpose. He has a purpose for it.
Thank you, Dylan, for your service. Well. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dylan, for your service.
Yeah. But what Dylan said was, and he thinks like me, he's kind of analytical. He broke down how much time there is in a week because he feels like there's something about life where as we go through it, we have shared experiences. And so, like with our wife and with our children as dads, our life is it consists of these shared experiences. So the way his brain worked was, he kind of thought about how much time there is. If you take the regular week, 168 hours, about 50 or 60 of that is working, plus another, depending on where you're going, 7 or 8 hours commuting each week. And you got to sleep, that's another 50, 60 hours. So what you're left with is about 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
To spend with your wife and your kids and your friends and taking care of yourself and, having maybe some quiet time, alone time, that sort of thing. So it starts to get to where you've really got to be careful with those to parse out that 6 hours in a way that is, and this is not all about time management. That was not his point. His point was he feels like he spends a lot of time with his coworkers.
Yeah.
And we do. And so that's a shared life experience. And so when he comes home, he can talk about, the people that he works with, and his wife, Emily, knows some of them. They go to work functions periodically, but he doesn't feel like he's sharing his, like there's two worlds happening. There's his work world and his everything else, not work world. and the two don't cross over that much, and they are very different. And so I think that's something that, resonated with me, and I'm sure other guys too that feel the same way. And I'm thinking about the guy that's picking up an extra shift to make ends meet, and he may not even have 6 hours a day, 40 extra hours a week.
Right.
And that, what comes with that is I would feel like probably a degree of guilt, exhaustion, and so like what all that made me kind of think through was not necessarily how do we bring those two worlds together, because I just don't think that that's going to be realistic, especially not in a case like Dylan, where those worlds are really, really different.
Yeah.
But how does he make the most of those 40 hours a week and it not be taken up with, overly burdened by a single hobby or scrolling or television or, fill in the blank of all the things that can be distractions. How do you make the most of that so that it is quality time as a dad with your wife and family?
Hey, Chris, today in the church, we seem to have this crisis of manhood where we're still wrestling with even, what's a man? What is he at all? What's he to do? How's he to behave? And so in that light, we're struggling, I think, in the church with discipling men. Why are we struggling with that? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We're struggling with discipling men largely because men think church is boring. They come to church and it's very feminized, right? From the colors to singing about drowning in an ocean of God's love. Like they're just not interested in that. But that's just the way it is, because that's the base of the church today, and a lot of churches cater to their base. So we're losing men from the very beginning. They're already bored with church. They're not enamored with Jesus, right? They want a king, they want a captain, like they want someone to lead them into battle, and they're not seeing that. So where we're seeing progress is when we drill down and we kind of go to that micro level and we look at discipling men, that 2 to 3 on one discipleship process where we're really showing men who Jesus is, like the authentic Jesus, not white, long-haired, in a dress, driving a Prius hippie Jesus, like not him, and nothing wrong with driving a Prius. I mean, gas prices are ridiculous. I get it. But like the Jesus of Scripture that commands respect and authority and affection and things of that nature. So we show them the true Jesus and then who they are in this Jesus. I mean, they're kings, bro, like kings in training. And we create just a greater affection and following for Jesus in men.
Better Man is one of our ministry partners. We love what Chris and his team there are doing. If you or your church is looking for a group study for your men to go through that covers the essentials of biblical manhood and helps men have a clear vision of how they can be as a man, they can gain confidence, become the man they want to be, improve relationships, and create a more purposeful life, check out the resources from our friends Better Man. You can find those at betterman.com. I remember hearing a quote years ago by a British writer and intellect back in the 1700s named Samuel Johnson. And the quote went like this: people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote. I think C.S. Lewis repeated it in some of his work or amplified it by a guy named Samuel Johnson. And I love that quote because it reminds me that some of what we're talking about today is not brand new. This is not, I think the walking worthy of the Christian life is not so much, do I have information now that I never, ever had before? It's, we're recording this in September 2023. Do I have information this September that I've never, ever, ever had before? Maybe, like ChatGPT told me something, but like it may be new. However, for the most part, I just need to be reminded.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think a lot of guys and all of us, humanity, we need to be reminded as often as we need to be instructed, because I
love that, Kent. I mean,
it's a great quote.
That makes me feel good about just the podcast in general, because what you and I don't want to ever.
Never had one original thought on this podcast, not one.
Right. I know, man. It's like, oh, I cringe at the thought of coming across as if we have the answers, and like this
Oh,
new
well,
information.
you may not, but I've got all the answers.
I knew you were
Obviously.
going to say
No,
that.
no.
You're so
Yeah,
dumb.
you tee me up.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like
Oh yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's good to be a reminder to someone, but
Yeah.
we're not coming up with revolutionary new thought necessarily. And that's okay.
Well, we're a community of dads trying to encourage one another to
Right.
continue to be
Right.
to walk worthy as fathers. And usually all we're doing is pointing back to stories in scripture to help amplify that and bring that to life, because in some ways it's a bit ecclesiastical, right? There's nothing new under the sun. And I think there's two underlying issues under Dylan and all the guys we talked to. And we've done research on this, a little more formal research, where we've gotten thousands of response to this question: what's your single greatest challenge as a father? And a lot of it does come back to time and time management and allocating time. And I want to say something as we get into two underlying issues that I think, if you're looking for the antidote, if you struggled with any of the issues that we've mentioned so far on today's show, they don't all just go away with a snap of your fingers. Some of them are not easily solvable. However, I do think there are at least two, maybe a dozen, but there's at least two underlying issues that if you could address those, you might get a little closer to the root cause. One of those issues is the issue of setting priorities, or setting a priority, which is funny because if you look at the word priority, it literally means the single most important thing. We've actually co-opted it in Western American English. And I think you can even go trace this back. It didn't ever used to be a plural word. So it's funny to look at that word, because it used to be, what is your priority? Because by definition, a priority means it's the most important. Now, it may change in the moment, right? My priority at 3 a.m. with the screaming baby is go change his diaper. That becomes my priority, even over getting a good night's sleep, right? So the priority may change, but you can't walk around carrying two priorities. I think it's one of the reasons why Jesus gave us that hint when he said, you can't serve both God and money. Different theological context, obviously, but he's basically saying, look, one of those is going to have to be more important. One of those is going to have to be the priority for you and who you're going to serve, who's going to be your master. And so for us,
that's a great thought.
I'd love to kick around this idea of things being put in the right order. I think it was Augustine who talked about our ordo amoris, which means the order of our loves. What is the thing you love the most? What is the thing you love the most? And a guy might be listening to this right now, and the dad, he may say, oh, I love my children the most. Well, man, I would encourage you to reconsider. If you're married, probably your wife should be above your children. That's a more primal relationship. That's the gospel. But even above your wife should be God the Father. You should love. Jesus said, you're going to have to hate your family. I mean, he didn't mean actually hate your family, but he meant when put to the test, you got to pick me over everything. You got to pick me over everything. And so this notion of prioritization runs throughout scripture, and it continues to come back to God has to be supreme in our heart and in our mind. And I love the Bible verse. It's said several different times, but I just found the one in John 6:38 for today's show. Jesus said, for I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will. So hang on, pause for a second. He did not come down with like an agenda all filled out that said, year 1, get 12 guys, year 2 and 3, put up with the knuckleheads, year 3, die for all these complete crazy people, forgive them. This wasn't all, it was all planned. It was all planned from the beginning, but Jesus didn't come down and say, here's my agenda. What he did was he depended entirely on his Father for his marching orders. So while on earth, he said, I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. So the fastest way for us to get to the root cause is part of your struggle as a father, your relative inability to set priorities. Is that a struggle for you? Is it a struggle for me? Am I going to prioritize, social media over spending time with my kids? Am I going to prioritize, what am I going to put above or below another thing? And I find it very interesting that some of the starting point for that from a theological perspective, if you look at the life of Christ, was God's will. So the question we got to ask ourselves, if we're overwhelmed with too much to do in any given lifetime, I heard Stephen Kendrick, the filmmaker, one time said, you can't raise enough money to do all of the projects you can dream of. You will always outpace your capacity, because I don't care if you can raise billions, you're going to have trillions of ideas. Like there's just, you will always be able to have more ideas for what you should do next with your time than you have time or money to do. Therefore, the premium gets placed on, have we rightly sifted God's priority in our life? Do we know his will? So for example, right now, if my house caught on fire, I would immediately shift my priority from worrying about this podcast and the content we're producing to putting out the fire and saving my family, right? It would be obvious. Like there's not even I wouldn't even debate it. It's just simple. I hung up on a guy last week. I literally hung up on one of my good friends last week because my wife was having a medical issue. We didn't know what was going on. She walked out, something looked physically wrong with her. I hung up the phone. I just hung him. He was talking and I hung up. Not because I'm more important than him, but because in that moment, my priority got redefined because I got to care about her above all. And I got to care about her health. You know, if she just came out and wanted me to try the cookies out of the oven, well, I probably wouldn't have hung up on the guy. But when a medical issue, so we all know this intuitively. There's an intuitive sense. The question is, when we have the capacity to choose, you know, my house is on fire, I'm not really making conscious choices. When we have the capacity to choose, how are we choosing? And what's the filter that we're shaking our time through, especially in these different seasons of life, right? When April and I first got married and I would go on a business trip, some of the times I would just take her with me, spend a few $100 on a plane ticket. She gets a free week in San Francisco, right? Like we would go together because we had no kids at home. Well, once we started having kids, that all started to change because she wasn't as mobile, and 2 tickets are more than one, and a baby's different than just 2 adults. And so we went through that season, and I find a lot of guys, Lawson, really struggle with prioritization, and they really struggle with prioritization and its shifts as they hit different seasons and phases of their fatherhood journey.
Yeah, you said something crucial, which is when you have the ability to choose. And so, you know, I think back to the guy that I mentioned before, that he just picked up a second shift or, you know, maybe a second job. And the priority in his life right now is making ends meet. I don't want to be numb to the need of a, you know, situation like that. But when you have a choice on priorities plural, that's a good lesson, by the way. The priority is what is the priority. And I love the way you tied all that together. You know, and like in Dylan's case, the sharing of 2 worlds, those shared experiences that are uniquely separate and different in his life. Is Dylan a different person, you know, at work than he is at home? I know him well enough to know he's not. He is a very authentic dude, and I would imagine his work cohorts experience the same Dylan, you know, as he is all the time. But how do you choose where you are spending your time? We don't want to get into a podcast of practical app, you know, calendar management and checklists of how you're sorting out what you've got to do for the day. But one of the underlying issues here can be, what are you choosing to do? What are you choosing to do with your time? And so, yeah, you know, it's a good reminder to me. I had this knee replacement surgery. The knee kind of gave out, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I've been home for going on a month and a half, and that is very unusual in my life. I've always been kind of a, you know, in the air and going to meetings and spending time with the team and spending time with customers. And it's a pretty big commitment, you know, to hit all these markets and all the various teams across the country. And so the way to accomplish that is live on an airplane and live in a hotel room,
Right. Right.
And so what this knee surgery has reminded me of, because I have been home working from home for weeks and weeks, is I'm going to reapproach. I'm probably 2 weeks away from this knee being good enough to where I can hit the road again. But I'm going to start slow, and I'm going to make it a priority to kind of keep it slower than I had been doing in the past.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's interesting. I think a lot of us did that in COVID. If you're old enough to, we're recording this a few years after COVID, but okay, some would argue COVID will never go away, but we're recording this in 2023. And just a few years ago, all of our capacity to travel got completely upended, right? I remember going the longest I ever went. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this had the same thing, without getting on an airplane. It was over a year, I think I went without getting on an airplane, which was remarkable because I'd be on an airplane every couple months, prior to that. And I think in some ways, for me, at least for me personally, I would say it was a fairly welcome grounding, honestly. I mean, like if in my role, what I do, I liked having the extra time. I read more. I moved at a bit of a slower pace. I felt more settled in some ways mentally. On the other hand, I also felt out of control. I felt like I had lost control of my ability to do some of the things that I would have wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read some recent commentary and research on the fact that some of the mental health issues people are struggling with right now are stemming from their loss of control during COVID. It wasn't even that they got sick or their loved ones died, even though I know people who were in that camp. Many people, they just are still wrestling with the fact that their life is not their own. There things can happen outside of your control that cause you to have to reprioritize your entire life. And some people, are kind of going down fighting.
Yeah. Look, there are some things that you can do. I don't want to get away from the point of what you said of, God has to be our single priority, but there are some practical things you can do. Like if you want to spend more time, more, just couple time, you and your wife, make a priority of, I don't know, once every other week, you go out for a couple hours and just you two and reconnect and have a nice dinner. It doesn't have to be expensive, and you can, get a sitter or somebody from the family, come watch the kids for a couple hours and just get off the two of you and, go be together. You can prioritize time with your 6-year-old son and, go for a walk. It doesn't have to be a weekend camping trip, get in what you can, but it is about recognizing that there are some things that you can do.
Yeah.
I'm talking practical, time with your,
and
I
would say one more, at least from my perspective. I'll be sitting on the couch after dinner, perhaps, and I might be checking up, like I'll be looking at a text message, or I might be looking at an email, or I might be reading a news article. And I still have kids in the home who are young enough where they may come up and say, "Hey, Dad, you want to go kick some soccer?" And in the moment, man, I sometimes think to myself, no, I really don't want to go out. It's 97 billion degrees and I'm going to have to take a shower after this. It can be perceived as an unwelcome interruption from what? From reading the stupid news?
Right.
What kind of moron would just sit there and continue to read the stupid Instagram news or whatever they're reading? I'm just it hits me, right? It's hit me. Now I'm on kids 4 and 5. So I've been this isn't my first rodeo in terms of raising young kids. And so I might've been a lot different 20 years ago. I have to ask my wife, but over time I've realized those moments where our kids invite us into their life get fewer and fewer as they leave the home, right? Even as they hit their teenage years. And so for me, one of my children requesting my time becomes immediately a very high priority. It may not be the number one because I may have to go on a business trip, or I may, whatever, there may be things I have to do. But I think if we're honest, right, here's what I would love for a dad to hear. If you're honest, you feel out of control in some areas of prioritization, but they are decisions that you made. and no one made them for you. So I'll give you an example. April and I have talked about, do we need to move to a different home? And we might not. Jury's out, right? We've been looking for a long time, haven't quite found the one that checks all the boxes, which my real estate agent says is a fool's chase. He's like, 8 out of 10 boxes, man, take it. You should take it. But we're still waiting for that perfect 10. Having said that, we are in a certain economic position right now that if we were to upgrade or move to a bigger home, we would be in a different economic position. It's not necessarily bad, and we could probably afford it. The question is, it would come with certain kinds of new economic stresses or challenges that we keep putting on this little, T grid as we talk about it. We just drove back from an open house last weekend, and we were doing the thing that couples do, right? We're going, well, on one hand, it has this and that and this and that. On the other hand, that'd be a bigger payment. We're gonna have to think about the financial implications of that. And if we jump into the bigger payment, are we going to have the money we're going to want to redo those walls and get that, so there were questions we were asking ourselves about the economics of the move. Here's what's really funny, right? The main question that we are asking ourselves is, does God want us to move? And it's not, there wasn't a burning bush at that house that spoke to us, right? The big question is, does God want us to move? And we don't know the answer to that one house at a time. So we're working through that process. But here's the deal. I could go out and get more. I could get more square footage. I could get more land. I could be in, a more spot instantly. However, what will come with that are some new financial pressures that, quite frankly, I don't have to go incur, right? No one's making me go do that. And so for a lot of us, right, the old Dave Ramsey plan, you could go get a used car and pay it off and own it, or you could get the brand new model and have a car payment every month, right? And some people would say, well, I have to do this. Well, no, you actually don't. You don't have to get the most new car every couple years. Part of the reason we do that, and this is the real topic I wanted to drive toward, because what I read, Lawson, under a lot of these fatherhood issues, mine included, is a spirit of discontentment. And it is, I have a house, but I want a bigger house. I have a car, but I want a nicer car. I have, a vacation at place X, but I want a better vacation at place Y. And so we're leaned forward, and it's like they say that, if you could interview a fish, he couldn't even tell you that he's swimming in water, right? It's so normal to him that he wouldn't even tell you, yeah, I'm swimming in water. Well, in America in particular, and I'll call it the West, but in America for sure, but in any really kind of developed country around the world, we are bombarded with messages about needing more, right? That's the water that we swim in. So it feels natural to just go get the next big thing, right? I remember early in my career, man, I was still in my 20s, and I got an opportunity to jump jobs. But I was going to have to jump in a way that would be not, what's the right word? Harmful? No, super big time commitment for a good chunk of extra money. But I was going to have to commit a lot more. That 50 to 60 hours a week was going to be more like 80 to 90. And I remember my wife asking, April asked me at the time, why would you do that? And it was funny. I had a bit of a crisis of ambition at the moment where I said, aren't I supposed to just get promoted? Isn't that the reason I'm working? Is to get the next one.
Yeah, I've been there. I'm laughing because I've been there. Yep.
And I think what would be interesting would be if we could take time, and maybe we'll just do this on another episode. Let's take time and let's address this issue next time of contentment.
Yeah.
Are we at a place where we are content with the schools our kids are in, content with our kids' batting average, content with our vacation status, whatever the issue is, and how much of that discontentment might be driving some of our tension, and we don't feel like we have the right purpose, or we don't feel like we have enough time. Is it possible? I just want to, ask the question, is it possible that part of what's driving some of these fatherhood challenges is the fact that we are discontent. I wonder, what do you think, Lawson?
Yeah, it's a big thought, and I like that we're going to tackle that next time. I thought you were going down the road of is your contentment driving your priority? And I think that would be that's a healthy question for us as dads. Is it so is getting the new car being driven because is the reason that you're wanting to look at getting another car because as you're driving around, you see what other people have that you don't have, and you wish you had something better? Is it because you're looking at where you are in your job today and your priority is promotion? Is that being driven because you love what you do and you want to move to the next level, which would get you, X, Y, and Z, and maybe you're wanting to pour your heart into other people, and that next job would be leading, and so that's kind of where you're coming from? Or is it because you think that the next step up is more money, more recognition? What's driving that desire for you to have as a priority? Promotion. And so for you guys with the new house, is moving into another place, or like this a woman that my wife Audrey works with, her car broke down and she has to have that car for her job. She's got to get from one house to the other and do what she does. And so there's no choice. She has got to get that car fixed. That's different than I want to go shopping for a new car and get the newest and best because of what? We need to ask ourselves, what's driving that? And so contentment, I'm curious to get into it next time, but what I wrote down in our show notes was, can contentment be a choice? Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. There's a lot in that. There's a lot in that right there.
Well, we'll tackle that next time. And what I'd love to leave guys with is I would like to share what is my 4-part life mission that I have had for probably about 10 or 15 years. It came out of our family retreats that we do as a family.
Yeah, I remember this.
I was asking myself the question, if I need a filter, and this is about priorities. So we'll go back to priorities as we close. And then next week, tune back in to have a discussion on contentment, especially if you're bitter, angry, frustrated, intense. Man, we'd love to have you back next week. You big baby. No, I'm just kidding. But if you feel like life's on top of you and you're discontent in a way, we're going to try to unpack it next week and give you some real hope and some joy and some fun. But here's a 4-part. It's literally 8 words so that I could memorize it. I needed it to be short. But what it does is it puts in order how I shake things through
this
my
is so
filter
good,
of life.
This is so good.
Number 1, love God. That is my number 1 priority. Number 2, serve April. Long as I'm married, long as she's alive, long as I'm alive, till death do us part, I'm going to serve that woman best I can with God's strength and power. Love God, serve April. Third is disciple boys. We have 5 sons and now 1 daughter-in-law at the time of this recording. My mission in life is to disciple those boys. And then it changes, of course, as they hit different stages of life. I got a 23-year-old and an 8-year-old that looks very different at both ends of that spectrum. But man, I know that my job is to disciple those boys. And then the 4th is bless others. Bless others. So 1 Peter 4:10, whatever gift you've been given, use it to bless other people. So for me, it's love God, serve April, disciple boys, bless others. I can recite it, without thinking. And sometimes when I'm presented with a way of spending my time or my money,
right,
that's where I pass it through, right? I pass it through. Does this decision help me love God? Or is it a component of me loving God? So I could say, yeah, we need a bigger house so we can host these big, discipleship roundups. Well, maybe, but I could fit 15 people in my living room I got now. So am I doing those every week? Right. Not really. So, okay. So do I really need that? Is that the reason? Is that the reason I need it? Love God, serve April, disciple boys, bless others. And you don't have to have, an 8-word one like mine. It doesn't have to sound the same. But I will tell you, it's helped me a lot in the area of prioritization.
Yeah.
I still feel the pressure. Excuse me. I still feel the pressure like every guy probably does. Time pressure, money pressure, and I can really relate. I don't feel the pressure of feeling like I don't have purpose, and I don't feel the pressure that I don't know what God wants me to do with my time. Like those don't confuse me anymore. They used to be more confusing than they are now. That doesn't mean I get it right every day. It just means having a filter to pass it through is really, really handy. And if something can make it all the way through that filter, but that's where I want to spend, the bulk of my mental energy, my prayer time, and my time in my calendar. Love God, serve April, disciple boys, and bless others.
Right on. Love it. So next week, let's talk about kind of the reasons behind what's driving our priorities. What you just closed with, dude, is so good. That 4-part life mission filter, I think, is going to be really helpful. We'll make sure we have that in the show notes and dig deeper into that as a practical process of thinking things through, but really then get deeper into what is it that is driving our decisions on a daily, weekly basis of how we are controlling and managing our priority in life. And is that being driven from a place of contentment, and how? So see you next week, guys, and hope you have a good week. Take care.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.